The No Kings movement emerged in the United States as a response to growing concerns about executive power, democratic norms, and what many activists describe as a monarchical style of governance. What began as a US-centered protest has, however, crossed borders. Europe, long a veteran of mass protest movements and transnational activism, is now participating, in solidarity, in parallel, and with its own framing. This video explores how and why the movement is globalizing, what's happening in Europe, and what it might mean for the broader democratic movement. To understand the global turn, we must first grasp its roots. The No Kings protests were organized by US civil society groups, such as Indivisible and the American Civil Liberties Union. They sought to mobilize opponents of the Donald Trump administration's second term around themes of concentrated power, the erosion of checks and balances, immigration enforcement, the militarization of domestic policy, and threats to civil rights. Early events included the June 14th, 2025 No Kings Day in the United States, which also saw international solidarity actions. By October, the movement claimed roughly 7 million participants across more than 2,700 US events. The name itself, No Kings, is deliberately evocative. It plays on the concept of monarchy, suggesting that no one person should hold unchecked power, that democracies reject thrones, crowns, and kings. As organizers put it, no thrones, no crowns, no kings. Now the most important question is, why is Europe joining in? The answer lies partly in transnational solidarity and diaspora activism. Many of the European No Kings demonstrations are led by US citizens living abroad or by European allies who share the movement's values. In cities like Madrid, Berlin, Lisbon, and Paris, rallies have been organized by Americans vivant à l'étranger and groups such as Democrats Abroad. Participants often carry US flags and banners reading, "No Kings, no tyrants," or the tongue-in-cheek slogan, "No faux king way." The movement thrives on a globalized citizenry linked through social networks, instant communication, and shared commitments to liberal democracy. Another factor cannot be ignored, shared fears of democratic backsliding. Though the movement's origins are firmly American, European participants increasingly frame their involvement in broader terms, defending democratic norms, resisting authoritarianism, and standing up for human rights and civil liberties. These are values with deep resonance in Europe's own history and politics. As one protester in Helsinki explained, some of her friends won't visit the United States right now because they're worried about what might happen if they do. Europe's current political climate, marked by populist surges, debates over executive power, migration, and border control, makes such solidarity all the more plausible. By aligning with No Kings, European activists both stand with American protesters and assert their own anxieties about democracy's fragility. When protests span continents, they acquire a new kind of symbolic weight. A demonstration outside the US Embassy in Berlin or a rally in Paris adds to the visual narrative. This is not merely a domestic American issue, but a global signal. Reports note that thousands across Europe have gathered to join, observe, or express solidarity. Media coverage has amplified this imagery, emphasizing the international dimension and reinforcing the sense of a shared democratic movement. As one outlet described it, millions gathered in cities across the US and Europe. In Madrid, Spain, several hundred demonstrators carried placards reading, "No man is above the law," and "No tyrants, defend democracy." In France, a protest near the US Embassy featured a woman dressed as the Statue of Liberty, dramatizing the transatlantic symbolism at the heart of the movement. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Portugal, US expatriates held a downtown rally, though observers noted a small pro-Trump counter-presence on the sidelines. These events may be smaller in scale than their American counterparts, yet their importance is unmistakable. They embody global reach, signal shared democratic values, and shape international narratives that transcend national borders, turning protest into a visible, symbolic dialogue between societies. The globalization of No Kings also brings with it a series of challenges and complications. Some European observers have asked, why are we protesting US internal politics? The answer lies in the interconnected nature of democratic norms. Yet mobilizing beyond US borders requires actively bridging that connection. European nations possess distinct constitutional traditions, and their protest cultures vary widely. Some citizens even find the "No Kings" framing ironically amusing, protesting an American leader for acting like a monarch while living under constitutional monarchies of their own. Unless demonstrations abroad are linked to local political contexts or domestic reform debates, they risk being dismissed as performative displays of solidarity rather than substantive action. Sustaining momentum, therefore, depends on follow-through, connecting the global message to tangible local goals. Critics, meanwhile, have accused the European protests of foreign interference, while others view them as an extension of American political polarization exported overseas. The U.S. administration's response has added further complexity. Officials and partisan media outlets have portrayed No Kings rallies as radical left or anti-American gatherings, framing them as ideological attacks rather than civic engagement. This rhetorical pushback illustrates how transnational activism, even when peaceful, must navigate not only geographic distance, but also narrative resistance across borders, languages, and political cultures. The extension of No Kings into Europe is significant for several reasons. It represents the globalization of protest culture, showing how modern activism transcends national borders. Digital networks, diaspora activism, and real-time media coverage have blurred the line between domestic and international politics. U.S. political developments now reverberate far beyond American soil. It also brings reinforcement of democratic norms. The core message, no one person above the law, is universal, and European participation amplifies its credibility. If only U.S. actors were involved, the movement might be dismissed as partisan or localized. International solidarity lends it moral weight and legitimacy. These actions also send a strategic signal to power holders. For the U.S. administration, global sympathy with domestic dissent suggests that democratic erosion is being watched and judged worldwide. That awareness introduces a form of reputational accountability beyond national borders. There is further potential for cross-pollination. European activists may adapt No King's digital organizing methods, while American organizers could learn from Europe's long-standing traditions of street protest and civic mobilization. Finally, the movement offers narrative leverage in foreign policy. Democratic allies can point to No Kings as a shared expression of values, using it to advocate for human rights, rule of law, and institutional checks and balances. In this way, what began as a domestic protest becomes a soft power statement about democracy itself. The No Kings movement is no longer simply a U.S. domestic protest, it is increasingly transnational. Europe's involvement, though smaller in scale, carries symbolic, strategic, and moral weight. It underscores that democratic norms are global, that threats to them are watched beyond national borders, and that citizens around the world are willing to stand in solidarity. As democracies everywhere wrestle with issues of executive power, accountability, civil liberties, and the role of protest, the No Kings movement, and its global dimension, reminds us that no nation is isolated when it comes to the struggle for democracy. Europe's joining in may yet change not just U.S. politics, but the shape of transatlantic solidarity, protest culture, and the architecture of democratic resistance in the 21st century.